of the projects. And so last session will look forward, and we have selected, we have three presentations this afternoon before the conclusion. There will be an additional very short presentation by INRA on the initiative that was mentioned yesterday, I guess, on the pesticide-free agriculture. What we would like to do is to come back to the French Ecophyto program. It's already a big one, but it's every day, well, every year evolving, and we started with Ecophyto 1, and then we moved to Ecophyto 2, and now we're moving to Ecophyto 2+. And Marion Bardy from the French Ministry of Agriculture will update us. And then at the EU level, there's also this kind of monitoring of what is going on in member states. And so we have Gonzalo Granado Luis from DG Health and Food Safety that will update us on the current status of national action plans across Europe. And then coming back to the future, I already touched upon this point yesterday that C-IPM is finished now, but will continue through this broader ERANET crop. Okay, so let's start with the Ecophyto 2+. So Marion, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. So as Antoine said, so yes, good. I will talk to you about the move from Ecophyto to Ecophyto 2+. So we started the Ecophyto adventure in 2008 with the publication of the first plan. No. Non. Ouais, j'ai pas dû appuyer assez fort. Okay. So, this plan, Ecophyto, was an outcome of what we call the Grenelle de l'environnement. That was a big environmental conference at the national level that happened in 2007 in France. And so Ecophyto was one of the actions that came out of this initiative, and it aimed at reducing the use of pesticides by 50% by 2018. This plan was under the responsibility of the Ministry for Agriculture, and among the measures, I will cite mandatory training of farmers regarding the use of pesticides, the creation of a network of pilot farms. That's the network DEFI that Xavier Rebout talked about. It's very rich because it provides us with a lot of references regarding the use of pesticides. And also the reinforcement and coordination of research and innovation. And also measures like the systematic control of crop sprayers, and also, of course, the setup of a usage indicator, which is called NODU at the national level. So then, in 2015, we've moved to Ecophyto 2. So, among the DEFI network, it had 2,000 farms, I would say. We obtained very good results regarding the reduction in the use of the pesticides. So one of the measures of this plan, Ecophyto 2, was to extend the network up to 3,000 farms. But with 3,000 farms, we're far from involving all the French farms. And there is still a strong issue regarding the transfer of innovations at the national level. So one of the actions in Ecophyto 2 is also the setup of a network of 30,000 farms, which will be accompanied toward a target of reduction of 50% of the use of pesticides And also the plan, Ecophyto 2, set up 2 new targets regarding the reduction in the use of pesticides, because we didn't reach the initial target of minus 50% in 2018. So now it's minus 25 by 2020 and minus 50 by 2025. In this plan, there are also specific actions to support the development of alternatives, and especially a focus on biocontrol and agro-equipments. And this time, it's under the responsibility of both the Ministry for Agriculture and the Ministry for Environment, also because it takes more into account the risks on the environment. And so the overall budget is 70 million euros per year. And it comes from a tax on the sales of protection plant products at the national level. So now, as Antoine said, we are moving towards the Ecophyto 2+ plan at the end of the year or beginning of next year. So what happened in between this year, at the beginning of the year, there was a study released at the national level that led to the setup of a plan of action, a specific plan of action on protection plant products with 4 priorities. And that's really a priority at the top level of the government, because it's a priority of our President of the Republic. So those priorities are first to rapidly decrease the use of the more concerning substances, both for health and environment. Also to better know impacts, inform and protect population and professionals, and preserve the environment. The third one is to amplify research and development, and also amplify the implementation of solutions by farmers. And the fourth one, to improve the governance and functioning. And what is important is that this plan of action is still under the responsibility of the Ministries for Agriculture and Environment, but together with the Ministry for Health, the Ministries for Health and Ministry for Research. So governance should be improved, but we have to admit that at the beginning, having those 4 ministries involved, it's a bit more difficult for now. But then it should be better, because it will be able to take things into account really from a systemic point of view. And then there was those discussions that were mentioned already regarding glyphosate at the European level. So in June, the government now published a plan of action regarding glyphosate, with the aim, if possible, to get rid of the use of glyphosate within 3 years. So for this, there are 5 priorities. Create a center of resources that should be resources made, like knowledge made available for farmers. Up to now, we were more, knowledge was made available for advisors, for instance, but now we want to get to the farmers. And also the setup of accompanying actions, a specific point on territorial networks, and also a specific monitoring of uses of glyphosate. And all this, that's called valorization at the EU level, but the idea is to have interactions with our with the other EU member states in order to share our experiences regarding glyphosate. So a national task force on glyphosate has just been set up, and we start working on this. So that makes a lot of initiatives in the landscape at the moment, because we still have the plan Ecophyto 2. We also have the plan of action on plant protection products. We also have the plan of action regarding glyphosate, and the landscape is quite complicated. So what was decided was to merge all those initiatives and to integrate them in plan Ecophyto 2+. So that's the story, and that's why we are at the 2+ step. So what about research in the Ecophyto plans? So every plan has specific actions, and now in the plan Ecophyto 2, it's even one of the main axes of the plan is research and innovation. So these actions have been progressively reinforced, and Anne-Sophie told you yesterday that this year the funds dedicated to research and innovation have been doubled. So we were at 4 million a year, and from this year on, it's rather 8 million euros a year. And since Ecophyto 2, for the research innovation axis, we've set up a scientific committee for research and innovation. So that's about 40 experts with a wide range of expertise that goes from agronomy to health issues, for instance. Several of the experts are in this room, are attending this meeting, and it's an opportunity for me to thank them for their involvement. So that goes from academic to applied research, and we also have farmers in this committee. So they support the ministries in the definition of open calls. They are also involved in the definition of the calls of the aeronets that we are taken part in. And they also support us in the definition of specific action that don't really fit with calls. And also, they process the evaluation and the selection of the projects that we fund within Ecophyto. And what's important, it's also that within this axis, we set up a national coordination of calls supporting the Ecophyto plan. Within Ecophyto, we only launch calls when we consider that the questions are not taken into account by other national research calls, like those of the National Research Agency, for instance. So thanks to this committee, we identify where we should focus our efforts because the questions are not taken into account, or because it requires to have some researchers work together that wouldn't naturally work together. So we also have actions like, we also have seminars like the one today, because we want them to share experience and we want them to understand each other and to share concepts and so on. So from 2008 to 2018, with more than 250 projects were labeled Ecophyto at the national level. So that amounts to more than 64 million euros. And among those 64 million euros, 22 million come from the Ecophyto program. There has been an increase in the budget, and regarding the involvement in European actions, we are participating in the C-IPM and the Suscrop aeronets. So really within Ecophyto, we've launched 4 calls for projects. The first one at the setup of the plan was to support the design of the actions. There was then a specific call on biocontrol, a call on the reduction of uses of pesticides in non-agricultural areas, and a call on alternatives to neonicotinoids. And 2 calls are open now. At the national level, there's what we call a national call. So that's a call to support PhDs that will support the overall Ecophyto plan. For instance, that could be PhDs to support the processing of all the data that we get within the DEFI network that you saw. And also a call regarding levers at the territorial level to reduce the use of pesticides. And we are preparing new calls for next year. So that's it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions to Mario? Yeah, Michael, okay.
Yeah, interesting talk, thank you. How do you measure reductions in pesticide use?
So it's a little bit to explain the indicator. At the French level, we have set up an indicator called NODU, and that was an action in itself of the first plan to know how you measure reduction in uses. And so maybe some people are more specialists than I am in the room, but basically you divide the doses used by reference dose for the pesticides, so that you don't have the bias depending on the large amounts that you use for some pesticides. But I don't know if they are in English, but there are references on the web explaining more in detail how we proceed.
Okay.
In other countries, we call it treatment frequency index.
No, that's not the same.
It's almost the same, isn't it?
Almost, but not exactly the
it's
same.
correct. Yeah, it's right. It's the number of treatment bits corrected by the difference between the actual dose and the reference dose, commercial dose, because as you said, you might use different, and then there is a correction. But it's TFI, treatment frequency index. It's
the second difference is you consider active ingredient when you have a different active ingredient mixed. You separate them to have a more precise indicator.
We do the same.
Than it was on with frequency treatment and filters. Sorry.
There should be. I think there exists, as you said, a paper that is describe the details of the calculations. There was a question, no? Ah, no. Okay, it's okay. Oh. Henriette?
I remember very early in the process, the French has made sector-specific IPM guidelines. What happened to all them? I think in 2009, 2010, you were all working on IPM sector-specific guidelines, and our French member liked it a lot, but I don't know where they ended up. Obviously nowhere.
I have to admit that I don't know. I don't know if my colleagues in the room know about this.
No?
Are you referring to these guidelines that were foreseen after the directive? There have been draft papers that were commented, and because within NGO we have been working on it, but it was just discontinued or not implemented, as I remember. I don't know exactly what the French did back then. Sector specific.
I have a second question. So I also see that sometimes the French ministry are proposing, when their council meeting, they have proposing to have a parallel sections to work on specifically on alternative to glyphosate. But of course, in the minutes of the council, you don't see any reference because it's a side event. Do you know what exactly the minister talking with the other ministers about? Because that, of course, could be very interesting also for NGO to know, I think.
Do you mean recently regarding glyphosate?
I think it was in July or something he did it. It was before Hulu resigned.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's anything to do with him.
No, no. I'm sorry, but I don't know about the content of the discussions. No.
You said in your talk that you had an overall goal that you would reduce the use of pesticides by 50% from 2008 till 2018, and that you didn't achieve that. So how many % did you actually achieve? Do you know?
I'm afraid none. I'm afraid none.
Vivian? No. No more questions for the time being? Okay. Thank you. Anyway, we'll look at this. Well, I think one of the this task force on glyphosate, said there was this center of resources is very much about disseminations of references, papers, whatever. I think that's something we should consider at the EU level sharing, and what we said at the this morning about trying to share references, evidence, and on alternatives would be part of this, should be part. So it's ongoing. I think this Center of Resources, the first version, because it would be on the website, should be available by Christmas, as far understood. So it's very quick now. And of course, it would not be perfect by then, and then it would be improved. Okay, let's move on to the status at the EU level. And Gonzalo Granado Luis, as I said, from DG Santé, is going to update it on the current status. I don't know how far you can get, but yeah, the floor is yours. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, Antoine. Thank you, everybody who has made this event happening. I'm very glad to be here. My name is Gonzalo Granado Lois, as Antoine has introduced. I'm working for the Commission, for the European Commission, in the Directorate General on Health and Food Safety, in a specific directorate, which is the number F. Formerly, we were known as FDO, but we lost the V and O, so we just Directorate F. So I will try to, let me see if I can manage. Yeah. So I will try to briefly introduce what are we doing in our directorate. Normally we are doing audits, and we've done some audits on the implementation of Sustainable Reduce Directive. I will explain about it. Some actions that the Commission has taken, and one of them, was a report that the Commission issued in 2017 to the Parliament and the Council about the implementation of the directive on sustainable use of pesticides. I'll talk about the implementation of the Article 14, which is about integrated pest management, and some of the actions that are planned for the future. Well, we are part of the Commission, and we are responsible. The directorate I'm working for, Directorate F, is responsible for ensuring that member states are taking in place and conducting official controls to ensure implementation of legislation of the European Union. And since 2016, we took over the policy responsibilities from our colleagues in Santé in Brussels on the directive on sustainable use of pesticides. And we are active in terms of audits in member states and candidate countries and also in third countries, not related to the SUD, but other aspects. Our work varies from medical devices to meat or animal welfare, but also pesticides, authorization of plant protection products, or implementation of the SUD. We are located not in Brussels, but in Ireland. So in a remote place with a nice building in a green area, as all Ireland is. So we are there, but we are part of the Commission, so don't be misled by the fact that we are not in Brussels. The unit I'm working for, we are focused on pesticides and biocides, and we are doing audits in different areas, like authorization of plant protection products, that we finished an audit series. We visited 7 member states, and we gathered information about how member states are authorizing plant protection products. And we also conducted audits on the marketing and use of plant protection products, on pesticide residues for products coming from outside the EU, and also for residues within the EU, and also on the sustainable use of pesticides. directive. So what about the SUD? Okay, first we've conducted a series of fact-finding missions at the beginning to 6 member states, but now we are doing audits. We're doing audits in agreement with the member states. We ask for some documents in advance, and then we do the audit, we visit the countries, and then we made a report, which are published. It takes quite a period of time between the audit and the report is being released, because there is a process where the draft report, there is a period of time that the member states can comment on, and then there is translation into languages, and so it could take 3-4 months to get the final. And all reports are published and are available in our website. Here is the link. So normally in an audit, we have an opening meeting with the competent authorities involved in the areas and the scope of the audit. And we want to learn more about the overall systems in place for the implementation of the legislation, and in this case of the SUD, about implementation of the national action plans, and also on the requirements from the directive. And we visit normally 2 regions, yes, especially in countries where there is a federal or kind of autonomy system, to see how the second level in the structure of the country, the competent authorities are implementing the different areas. And then we always try to visit farms as well to learn more about how official controls are being carried out. And at the end, we have a closing meeting and we report on this audit. So there are some findings that we describe what we've seen, some conclusions, whether the system is fit for purpose or not. And at the end of the report, there are recommendations, shortcomings that we think that must be addressed, and actions has to be taken. We issued a draft report, member state commented on it and sent an action plan, and then the final report is issued. The action plan that is sent is assessed, and then there is a follow-up. So the action that the member state are telling us that are going to be taken, after a period of time, we come back to them saying what you've done, to see whether the actions have actually been taken and successfully or not. At the end of all the audits in one specific area, we issue an overview report that can also is published and would be available to you. So on SUD, we've have a very intensive program in 2017. We sent a web-based questionnaire to all member states. We conducted 6 fact-finding missions. Fact-finding missions are not having recommendations, but in a sense is gathering information like in an audit. And we issued a report to the Parliament. And we issued also an overview report on the SUD. So it was quite an intensive year for us. Other activities, we launched an SUD web portal in the Commission side, where there are, well, you cannot see it here, but you can here click to see the national action plans of all the member states. And at the end, there is also an engine search for information about different areas like IPM and this is populated with links to the member states' websites. We've issued other documents, like you can see here, the guidance and monitoring, and we hold 2 working groups per year on SUD. Some of the representative of member states coming to these working groups are also present here. And there we gather all member states and us, and we discuss issues about the implementation of the SUD. So, and letters were sent to all member states where we identified its own shortcomings or weaknesses in the implementation of the SUD. What have we done this year? We've changed from fact-finding missions to audits, and we've already carried out 4 audits this year to Spain, Hungary, France, and Belgium, Bulgaria. And we had again 2 working groups. And we've launched a specific VTSF, Better Training for Safer Food program, specific on IPM. The first meeting will be in December this year, and there are in total 14 events through the year in many different areas, and specific crops will be taken into account. We are working in developing harmonized risk indicators according to Article 15, and this is taking quite a lot of efforts and time from all of us, from the member states also, but also from us to get an agreement on this. And we are dealing with other issues like the Citizens' Initiative on ban of glyphosate, and petitions, and some questions from the parliamentary members of parliament, and requests from other member states. So keeping us quite busy. Regarding the report, I think it's important to highlight what we have highlighted to the Parliament. And so there are, you know, in the SUD there are different provisions on training, on pesticide application equipment, on aerial spraying, water protection, handling and storage. So there is a kind of number of requirements. And so in our report to the Council, we identified some areas of concern regarding the national action plans. Some weaknesses have been identified in the objectives and targets. Also about pesticide poisoning systems to gather information on incidents, about IPM, about harmonized risk indicators or the lack of harmonized risk indicators, and then availability of low-risk active substances. I will briefly introduce some of these areas regarding the national action plans, where the member states, as we've seen from France, that there is a national action plan where objectives has to be set to reduce the dependency on pesticides and impact or risk. So in general, these national action plans are the basis for the controls of the member states. And these are varying from one member state to another quite a lot. So it's a quite different way of approaching this issue. And also we've identified that there is problems to identify or to establish precise and quantitative objectives and targets in these plans. Training is one of the aspects of the directive, and it's included in all the national action plans. 4 million professionals have been already trained and increasing. And this is important for IPM because one of the elements included in the training of operators, users of plant protection products, is about notions of IPM. So it's an important issue on the implementation of the directive and on the knowledge of the IPM. And then IPM itself, we've identified that there is a need to develop criteria to assess implementation of the 8 principles of the IPM, and it's something that is not easy, and we acknowledge is not easy at all. But we will try, and we are already taking some steps in order to help member states to develop such kind of criteria to assess the implementation of IPM with the objective of reduction of dependency. So we want to support member states in this development of the criteria, and also this training that has been prepared for IPM, where we will gather information also from member states. What are you doing? How do you control? What are the type of assessments you are doing on implementation of IPM? And also the Commission, not directly from Sante, but from other DGs, are supporting the research in this area. We've seen yesterday and today in the presentations different areas in the research, and then to these messages and these systems has to be conveyed to the growers to use these decision support systems in order to comply with one of the principles, which is having thresholds to take decisions. And so the work that is being done in research is very important to fill this gap. So the requirements of the Article 14 is to promote low pesticide input, controlling using other techniques or methods prior to chemicals, if possible, and then to get access to tools and decision-making tools is important. We are asking member states to reflect IPM in the National Action Plan as well, and to ensure that the users are really implementing IPM principles. So one of the areas is to encourage the implementation of crop-specific IPM guidelines. In some countries, they are more advanced than others in these developing guidelines. So it's something that is to be addressed in some member states more than in others. So regarding the implementation of IPM, we've gathered information on this, and there was some level of enforcement of IPM in 19 member states, and in 11 of them they were doing as part of routine controls to growers. In 6 were as part of the additional measures under the Common Agricultural Policy, and in 2 member states as part of the more general controls. So there are different ways to approach this, and how to harmonize this is difficult, of course, but at least to try to set some harmonized criteria would be our aim for the next year. Also, IPM in some member states are subject to certification by third parties in some schemes that has been developed, specific on integrated production, and it was also reflected in this work. So our plan for the next year, well, we have to do another report to the Parliament. National action plans, the directive requires that must be reviewed after 5 years. In some cases, this review could lead to a revised national action plan, and now is the time for this review. France has taken the lead in this, and they've done two reviews, but in other member states are now ongoing in this review. So we will assess the information on the national action plans. We've already received some of them, but we will work on the evaluation of these national action plans in order to report to the Parliament. We will carry out 6 audits next year to 6 member states, so in total will be 10 audits plus 6 fact-finding missions, and another 6 in 2020. So it's a high priority from from the DG Santé to conduct these audits on implementation of SUD. We'll do again 2 working groups and an IPM workshop in May on how to assess implementation of IPM. And in this second report to the Parliament, what we will introduce was an assessment of the national action plans. We've received already 11, but by March next year, we would hope to have the majority of member states. We will also assess the responses to the questionnaire that we are sending to member states, of course, the results of the audits we are carrying out, and we will make a statement on the progress on the implementation of the directive. So these are our aims for the next year. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Questions? Yeah. Oh. It's coming. Okay, first.
And I was wondering about the possibility for member states to, like when they send their national action plan, like is this possible for the Commission to just reject it and ask them for more like strict measures or something like
okay.
that?
Well, this is part of the subsidiarity of the directive. So there are some requirements, and then member states have to do the work, and have these national action plans have to comply with certain specific points that are required in the Article 4 of the national action plans. We are not receiving and then assessing and accepting or not. What we are doing is all the work we've done in the last 2 years on fact-finding missions and audits, these and the following years, we are assessing somehow how it has been implemented. But also we are going through the national action plans in more detail in these audits, and we are identifying weaknesses. And if some aspects required by the directive have not been taken into account in the national action plans, then recommendations can be issued, highlighting these shortcomings, and in these cases, the member states should take action in order to amend the shortcomings or to correct the shortcomings. But it's not the evaluation just when we receive and then we accept or not. It's a different process.
For the assessment, you compare the national action plans and the progress of implementation against certain criteria. And then you will have a result, and you will see which reasons or factors will be the most important, which hinder the implementation. So will you try to combine this to kind of like a best practice model for, or several best practice models as to recommend to the member states how to better implement? Because I mean, there should be an outcome also from the result of the assessment to progress somehow. What are the possibilities? Is there any idea in this direction?
Well, we issued a report to the Parliament last year where we criticized some of the aspects of the national action plans. Member states were already in the process of revising or reviewing their national action plans stopped their process because they took into account some of our some of the weaknesses that we had identified in this report to the Parliament. So there is a delay in some member states to deliver the second revised national action plans due to these reasons, to taking on board the comments that were made. The audits would also help in this regard, but when we evaluate the National Action Plan. We have agreed, yes, to ensure that the aspects required have been taken into account, and it's not a comparative assessment between national action plans, France to Spain to Hungary or to Czech Republic. It's more about each standalone national action plan covers the requirements of the directive. However, at the end, when we are issuing a report which highlights some shortcomings, member states take this information on board and improve their systems, of course.
Okay, Vivian. No.
Thank you. I guess we have learned yesterday and today that there are many measures, IPM measures, which at the end somehow cost money to the farmer, to the consumer, and so forth. And that hinders the proper implementation of action plans, especially when it comes to numbers, to figures, to reaching that percentage, or those kinds of things. So if you eventually come to the result that it's very hard to get to your goal because it's market related, is the EU thinking of any kind of market reaction or regulation to get to the goal by another way than IPM on farm level?
Our main aim now is IPM and is implementation of IPM. We want to help to establish criteria to assess the implementation. We understand that growers are economic operators and they must make profit of their work. However, it's not for the Commission to impose member states how to address that the growers implement IPM. And this is the subsidiarity principle that member states could take their own action. But it's about the policy, the responsibility for the policy makers in the member states have to decide how to help in the case that they consider that the implementation of IPM can be constrained by economic reason. The definition of IPM includes ecological issues and aspects and economical as well. But so there is a wide aspect, and we know that it's not easy, but some of the good practices that we've been told these days about rotations, about using resistant varieties, or this could take this could be an impact to the growers, and therefore it's very important to have policies in the member states to help this change.
Oh, yeah. Can you pass on to?
Can I show you the table that is right behind Rodrigo is talking about the common agriculture policy. Okay, you can see within the common agriculture policy there are a lot of things that member states can already do. There's the greening of the European common agriculture policy. Member states right now have to do diversification. They have to set aside 5% of the ecological focus areas. And the non-productive or the productive areas of the EFAs has to be pesticide-free from 2018. Member states can do IPM under the fruit and vegetable regulations. They can do IPM as a voluntary measure under rural development, and all that they can pay extra money to the farmers. And then they can do the farm advisory system. So there are many things that member states can do. Every year, the common agriculture policy spent 60 billion euro that they're paying to EU farmers. There's a lot of things we can do. Right now, the common agriculture policy is being reformed. Yeah. And one of the proposals is to change crop diversification into crop rotation. So there is many things we can do. We don't need extra money. We just need the 60 billion to go right, to target right.
Yeah, and in this regard, in the discussions on the new agricultural, the common agricultural policy, some aspects of the SUD will be incorporated, such as in order to cross-compliance, in order to get the money, some aspects like using pesticide application equipment that has been tested, or training of operators. These are questions that will be included within the normal, it has to be approved, it's not yet, it's just a draft, but these are proposals to include these questions within the new cross-compliance and the new agricultural policy. So growers not complying with these requirements will be penalized, and then is another reason why to include them. So yeah, there are tools that member states can already use with this common agricultural policy, using this money wisely to help for the change.
Sorry, this time it's a question. So are you this time, when you receive the National Action Plan, are you going to ask questions of clarification to member states, or do you really just receive and comment?
Unfortunately, for the next, the timelines are such that we need to issue the report to the Parliament in June next year or somehow. So we will be receiving national action plans, and we won't have time enough to comment back, but we will prepare straightforward the report to the Parliament. Unfortunately, we cannot manage with the time constraints that we have. And especially next year, we are doing 6 audits in member states, but 6 audits will be carried out at the beginning of the year in order to be able to include the information from these member states, from these audits, into the report as well. So is a matter of resources and how can we manage this workload.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Gonzalo. We move on now. The next talks about the follow-up of C-IPM. As I said yesterday, we decided end of 2016 that we would liaise with the new Ranet Suscrop, and Philippe Nico from INRA is involved in the Suscrop to some extent, and is going to update and tell us what can be said, because this Suscrop just started recently. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antoine. I have to apologize for the funny voice. I think I need some pesticides or maybe biocontrol. I don't have so many slides, so the torture for you will not be too long. So a few words about Suscrop, which really continues in many aspects on what has been going on with C-IPM. It's typically an AeroNet action, and so it aims to strengthen the European research area, and this time in the field of sustainable crop production. Same kind of means, so enhanced cooperation and coordination of different national and regional research programs. So it brings together owners and managers of national and regional research and development, and I forgot what the I... Innovation, thank you, programs of EU member states, EU associated states, and also third countries. You will see Canada is implicated in Suscrop. This project is coordinated by Christian Breuer from Germany, and I have to discover the magic. Maybe I pointed the wrong way. Wait. C'est bon? C'est bon. C'est bon. Okay, so a few words about the first call for research projects, which was published in January of this year. The groups who wanted to submit projects had to have consortia of at least 3 partners. And these consortia had to represent at least 3 of the Suscrop partner countries. which comprised 19 countries in total. You see the flags here. And as I pointed earlier, Canada was also included in the funding of this first call. In total, there's approximately 18 million euro that are available, 14 million from national funding agencies, and an additional 4 million euro from the EU. And as it was mentioned earlier, Ecophyto is also providing, on the French side, is also providing special funding for projects which concern IPM. The scope of the first call was to support, you will find some quite usual keywords, scientifically excellent, transnational research, development and innovation projects that contribute to the improvement of sustainability and resilience of crop protection. There were 4 topics. The first one was the enhancement of predictive breeding technologies and development of new genotypes leading to new phenotypes and crop varieties for improvement of plant health, protection, production, and resilience. And I put in blue some of the keywords that are elements of IPM. The second topic was the development and exploitation of novel integrated pest and crop management methods and practices. So we're right in IPM here, or IP, as was mentioned earlier, integrated production. Third topic, improvement of resource use efficiency of crops and cropping system. And the last topic, systemic research on natural agricultural crops as part of an ecosystem, including interactions between plants and other organisms. And so here the plant was to be considered as a meta-organism. So a few words about the timeline. Expected timeline, which you can find on the website of SUSCROP. So the deadline for submission of pre-proposal, it was a 2-step evaluation. First, pre-proposals, which had to be submitted early April. And 88 projects were found to be eligible. There were very strict eligibility criteria. They were reviewed by a panel of international experts. And in mid-June, some consortia were invited to submit full proposals. And then in end of August, the proposals had to be submitted. So 26 consortia were invited to submit full proposals. And among those, about half of the projects that were submitted contained IPM-related elements. So this is just to highlight the continuity with the C-IPM AeroNet project. Then the full projects were reviewed by international experts. And a very interesting part of this review process, I forgot to mention that the institution who's helping with the evaluation process is the French National Research Agency, ANR, and they included this time a rebuttal phase. So the consortia received the comments of the experts, and they had a few days to react and send back information to the experts, who then took this information into account. So now, in mid-December, the results of the evaluation and the selection will be communicated to the applicants, and the grant negotiation will be able to start. And all the results, of course, will be posted on the website of the Aeronet, Suscrop Aeronet. And I will stop here because, as you can see, I cannot say any more.
I must say that when we set up the agenda, we thought that the project would be publicly, well, the selected project would have been publicly published, but unfortunately not. And okay. Questions to Philippe? And so it's really important this, sorry. And thank you, Philippe, because I appreciate that you are not really in good shape, but anyway. Any questions to Philippe? So, yeah. David?
Very simple one. Will there be a second call?
You're already in the starting blocks. My understanding is that, yes, there will probably be a second call, same as for C-IPM. But I'm not the coordinator of the project. You may have direct information from Kristen Boyer.
It's a follow-up questions about this new Aeronet policy with broader topic rather than in the past there was like IPM or now they're trying to. So does that mean that Aeronet, this new Aeronets would last for longer than 3 years or 6 years? And that would be, well, that could be calls, I don't know, every 2 years, 3 years. Any clue? Or some funders might know in the room. Stefan?
Hopefully I got your question right. There are no other Aeronet funding schemes available at the moment. We are now dealing with Aeronet Co-Fund, and this will last for 5 years. That's it. Okay. Within that period, the funding consortium has to implement and finalize one call, which is the one you, Philippe, have reported to us, and the funding consortium is further allowed, or by their own decision, to make additional calls. And these additional calls will be finalized. That means the approval of the final reports, scientific reports, will be beyond the official end of the Aeronet Co-Fund. So this is like it is here with C-IPM. So, but I'm not aware of any other funding scheme. And what is under discussion is, of course, the funding scheme or funding mechanism. It's called the partnerships in Horizon Europe, which is the next and future framework program for research and innovation in Europe. Thank you.
No further questions. So we're looking forward to seeing how many of this 50% of the project included IPM related element would be selected. Just follow up on this. What we have agreed that I said yesterday that we foresee a final C-IPM workshop once all projects has been finished, and we have agreed with the Christian Breuer that well, we should discuss to what extent it can be co-organized with Suscrop, and there will be, I think, the kickoff meeting of the sector would be next year, which might be a bit early for us, but we can join. But of course, that all our project won't be finalized. But anyway, we will be discussing and checking in the coming month. Okay, before, it's not in the agenda, but we did mention yesterday that the INRA launched kind of initiatives for the next Horizon Europe framework, and pushing forward a broad topic on pesticide-free agriculture. And Laure, can you put the slide? We have one slide only. And I will invite Pierre Dussor, who is with the Department of Europe within INRA, who is engaged into the management of these initiatives, to comment these slides and maybe to deliver some messages to those who might be interested.
Yeah, thank you, Antoine. Well, some of you are already involved or already knew the initiative. So just before I begin, you might already have taken the little brochures that we developed. It's if not, it's maybe some left are still there, and otherwise you can just find it on Google. You just Google INRA and pesticide free, and it's the first result popping up. So on the ambition, very briefly, I think I won't go into the details of what it's written here, because I think the title of the document summarizes quite well what we want to achieve. So going towards chemical pesticide-free agriculture. We discussed it this morning, actually, and the fact that usually, currently, the concept is reducing pesticide use. The fact that we aim to go towards chemical pesticide-free agriculture is not only reducing pesticide use, it's going towards something bigger, and it's during a roadmap to achieve this goal. Even if it's extremely ambitious, extremely bold, we feel that setting this kind of targets will probably shift the way we think about the science behind this topic. So that's why we felt that we needed to have this very bold and ambitious targets. Obviously, we have various bottlenecks which are very multidisciplinary, so agronomic, obviously, but also economic, sociological, and political. What we aim to do here is to address the scientific aspect of the problematic, taking into account these different questions of sociological, economic, as well as political, of course. So involve the community, the stakeholders, and the actors around pesticide use, so farmers, producers, and so on. So not only to tackle the scientific questions, to deal with at first, but also to have the implementation in mind while thinking about that. The process behind this initiative. So first we had the co-creation of this paper with two German teams, so ZALF and GKI. So it was a German-French collaboration to begin with. We wanted to broaden a bit this initiative by inviting some European colleagues at the first meeting we had in Paris in October this year. So again, some of you were there, not all of you. Again, it was quite a challenge to organize that in a very short period of time. But again, we want to broaden again this initiative. So if you're interested in participating to the next meeting we will have in Germany in May next year, feel free to contact me, Antoine, or anyone you know at INRA, and I'm sure the message will pass on to the right people. But basically what we did during this first workshop was to bring a first community of scientists together to discuss this topic and to define some priority field of actions. So we just decided to cut a bit this quite broad subject into subtopics, so biocontrol, insect and microbiome, genetics and new species, technology, modeling and agro-equipment, agri-food system, transition and societal adoption. So to again tackle a bit the different bottlenecks that were addressed, that were listed, and another one on economy and trade that was highlighted during the event actually, and we felt that was something that needed to be addressed as well, and not forgotten. So again, we will have a next event in a few months from now. What we'll do between now and then is to have some working groups elaborating some action plans around these topics that were identified, basically to set ideas of main scientific questions around these topics and how to address them. And then we will reconvene, try to see how we can articulate these different topics, not in a silo way, so to address them also together, because we feel that if we think only, for instance, in new technologies for reducing pesticides, it won't be sufficient. We need to see how it can be used together with biocontrol. So again, I think some of the presentation of yesterday, because it was yesterday afternoon, are also in this kind of way of thinking. So it was very interesting. And basically the final aim of our initiative is to bring that into Horizon Europe, to the next programmation, and show to everyone that there is still much to be done around pesticide use. Even if some things were done before, the shift of way of thinking between reducing pesticide use and shifting toward pesticide free, it's again paradigm shift, and definitely probably it will bring new scientific questions, a new way of addressing the questions, and we hope new solutions in the midterm future. I don't know if you have specific questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. Yeah, we can open the floor for questions. Stefan?
Thank you. Just to help me to see things clearer, I'm not aware of this initiative. Is this a topic you want to bring into Horizon Europe? ? Or is it a research initiative which should grow? What are the links to SASCROP now? I don't see the context.
So there are many things going on in Europe, in France, and at INRA. Just to set a bit of framework around this initiative. So it's not something living on its own. At INRA we have, and in France, we have different initiatives going on this topic. So basically what we want to do with this very specific initiative there, it's indeed to bring it as much as we can to Horizon Europe. But we know that we cannot do it by ourselves, INRA or France, or France and Germany, or France and Germany and the Netherlands or Italy. We need to bring it as a group, as a community of research, of end users, of actors, to show that we have been thinking of a way to actually aiming to the target and to implementing it. So the idea is indeed to bring it to
Horizon Europe.
Yeah.
And you want to join your forces and efforts with all the other member states that this is a topic in your Horizon Europe. Did I get the message?
I'm sure that the European Commission already knows that it's
a
very important topic. But again, it's not just putting it on the agenda, but trying to make sure that when it comes on the agenda, it's we have a community ready to address the topic efficiently. Let's say.
I'm asking because I have to put forward such initiatives to my colleagues, so that's the reason why I'm just focusing on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
But again, just to come back on what was mentioned before on partnerships and so on, it's we still are trying to understand how it will be set up within the Horizon Europe and basically how the different topics, let's say around food agriculture, sustainable resources, and so on, will be spread between the different missions / partnership.
Yeah,
goals
nobody
and so on.
knows at the moment.
Well, so indeed, the idea is just to have some working force ready to move on.
Yeah. One additional point, when we will have our kick-off meeting with SASCROP, I guess at least it would be, I'm not the coordinator, I have no agenda, but just thinking aloud here, to try to put that on the agenda of that meeting, so that there is an integrated approach, so that there you will have at least a wider part of the community who can join this initiative.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. May I hand over?
Yep. Sylvia?
Well, I'm involved in biocontrol and integrated pest management really my whole working life, and I just want to ask, what exactly do you understand, or your initiative understand, by the expression chemical pesticide? Because when I consider what you can include in this term, I really wonder in which direction this initiative should really go. I appreciate that there is somebody thinking across and ahead a lot, but from discussions we had in our countries about use or not use of chemical pesticides, I really wonder what is really summarized under chemical pesticides. What do you really want to, what do you really mean, what do you really want to include, and what should be a time frame to replace chemical pesticides? And I know it might sound nasty, but I mean it's really serious, because
that's something
these topics are really provoking also discussions in the society, and in the end it's the agricultural producer who has to live with outcomes of initiatives also like that. So I really want to know, what do you mean by chemical pesticide exactly? What do you include in this? What's the time frame of the outcome of an initiative aiming at completely pesticide-free? And I'm not from industry. I'm a researcher in biocontrol and IPM. But I think this is something important we have to address also.
Yeah, well, again, no, that's a very good question. But I again invite you to read the document. It was for the sake of simplification, which leads to shortcuts sometimes. But it's synthetic pesticides, to summarize. And on the deadline, well.
But sorry, this could also include Bacillus thuringiensis toxin. Then this would also be included then, or not, because it's synthetic. You produce it. It's a substance which is produced by a bacillus. So that's my question. Is there a broader definition then in this initiative? What about substances like copper and so on? What's all included under chemical pesticides or chemical synthetical pesticides?
I think we don't have that Manichaean approach.
No, but I think it's important.
On this
it's
this
important
question.
to define it.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I agree. But again, I invite you to read the document. And on the timeline, well, we have some studies on impact at INRA that you might know that have shown basically that you need 20 years between the beginning of an initiative and until you reach the actual impact. So, well, we feel that 2050 it's quite a good target, but again, you have to be hopeful.
I think it's just the beginning of a story, I see, Sylvia. And I think the key point, key word I would retain from Pierre is a change in paradigm. So you look at this possible chemical pesticide agriculture, and you assess what would be changing in your practice as a science. What does that mean exactly? So Stefan said, okay, what does that mean with respect to subscribe? I think it's in parallel. It's different, of course, on the short term. We still have to
I
improve.
said I appreciate
and
it,
that to look
but
at
it should be clear what we are talking about.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
But that's please join.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, Viviane.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea as well. I have kind of the same question as she has, especially in regard to organic agriculture. That the only difference we then would be having between the organic agriculture and the so-called conventional agriculture would then the use of mineral fertilizers, especially when you look at very sophisticated organic farms or greenhouse. So I was wondering, then we have two major developments coming up because we want to have more of ecological and organic agriculture. There's strategies like that. And so everything converges. Is that the goal? Or are you, how do you think about the organic agriculture in that regard?
I think we take it at a, let's say, cross-cutting, not topic, but a way to approach this problematic. You can have solutions in organic agriculture that will be either agronomic, technological. So basically, we don't take it as an entry point, but as a cross-cutting, let's say, way of approaching the whole thing.
But on top of fertilizers, Viviane, I guess in these initiatives, as far as I understood, so novel plants or biotech might be included, which so there is no ex ante specifications apart from trying to get rid of chemical pesticide. So it's slightly different. It's not fully different, of course. Okay, Didier. Then,
here, it's okay. I've got a microphone. It's more a comment than a question. On every kind of expertise or expert reviews on decreasing the use of pesticide or getting rid of pesticides, actually the kinds of solutions that are put forward are the same for organic agriculture and for conventional agriculture. It all turns down to the same methods, to the same principles, and to the same solutions, really. So I don't think we should oppose organic agriculture and conventional systems so much. There are just a continuum of forms of agriculture where the pesticide issue is important. We just had a review on alternatives to copper in organic agriculture, and actually the conclusions we reached were almost exactly the same as the one on synthetic pesticides that was made 10 years before. It all turns down into adjusting the current systems, adopting new innovations such as resistant varieties, biocontrol, etc., and also rethinking systems, because if you want to go further to a simple reduction and go the next step, you have also to rethink the systems, and we have seen a lot of presentations here where system reconception is crucial. So to me, the question is not so much whether you target organic agriculture or conventional agriculture or whatever. It's just a matter of putting the right means in front of the right problems.
okay, so thank you, Pierre. So if you're interested, you have a leaflet and you can contact Pierre. So now we are moving to the conclusion of this workshop. Yeah. We should be able to free you were before 3:30. That was the scheduled time. So again, Marion will conclude on behalf of the ministries, Ecofito, and on behalf of yourself as well.
Thanks a lot. What we experience at the national level through our national action plan that we talked about earlier is that changes in practices take time. As you underlined, the indicator measuring the use of pesticide doesn't improve, but we made progress regarding many things. We changed the profiles of the molecules that are available. We made proofs of concept. We collected many data. We encouraged networks of farmers. And also we changed the way that we teach farming in France now. And so that's because it's not just about a figure, but it's really an overall dynamics. And regarding research, we are facing the issue of the reconception of agricultural and food systems. And so that also goes with the renewal of the way that we formulate research questions and also the way we perform research. Also because there is an urgent need to accelerate the transfer of innovations to the farms and in the fields. And in this dynamics, I think that IPM is really fundamental. And during this meeting, you illustrated various issues at stake to achieve this. So we cannot be exhaustive, but discussing with my colleague Anne-Sophie from the Ministry of Environment, there are 2 points that we wanted to highlight at the end of the workshop. So we particularly appreciated the highlights regarding the issue of working on the overall resilience of systems in order to prevent the emergence of pests. That was, for instance, illustrated via the monitoring of the beneficials instead of just the pests. And that raises issues like the ability to measure the preventive effect of the solution that we can shape. And the second point is the issue of disseminating and sharing results. In your project, we saw that you have a variety of approaches to these questions. Some are more, let's say, classical, some are more innovative. I really encourage you to work on this point, to make sure that your results will be implemented in practice. And that's why we, as co-founders of the C-IPM, particularly expect from the project. And today, those 2 days were a good opportunity for you to cross-fertilize on this respect between the projects. So now I wanted to thank you all again for coming. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks to Antoine and Laure for the organization of this meeting. And I will be very happy to see you again at a more advanced stage of your project. So thanks a lot and see you.
So a few words, thank you Marion, and a few words before you can get back home or visit Paris. I know that some of you are staying, I'm looking at Joseph, and so we'll start with thanks to the speaker and coordinators. When we decided to set up this workshop, it was not that easy because C-IPM is finished and some projects, as we have seen, are also finished. But you committed yourself to come, not just to come, to prepare a nice presentation. It was very well prepared, and also to deliver this 2 pages. And so a big thanks. And to me, it's a good signal that you are interested by this initiative. It was mentioned by some of you. So this, upscaling and sharing, networking across Europe. Thanks to the chairs and rapporteurs, and the rapporteurs will be contributing to a kind of executive summary. I don't know exactly what it should include, but we will discuss that a bit later. A big thanks to Laure, because she managed the logistics, the catering, the documents and everything, and also our institute, Astredor, the Institute for Horticulture, that also contributed. Many people contributed, so we'd like to ask Laure to convey our thanks to them. And Ecofito, of course, for sponsoring this event. Now, so just three outcomes. We have seen that, well, we started and said, okay, well, let's put together the solutions. So some in Germany, in Switzerland, so whatever, have found solutions, tools, and we have to share. And we see that it's not that easy, because there is a diversity of solutions. We have seen through ELAT Pro that we have a model in one country, and when you try to use it elsewhere, it does not work. So it needs adaptation. So this is life, and but this is why we need to continue. But we have seen also the platforms, well, I say Euroblight and Eurowit. Now the name have changed a bit, but it's still the same concept. So for monitoring, it has really demonstrated added value of putting together this data, and without well, just existing data, just by putting together. And also alignment of protocols, that was mentioned by you. It's also something that would ease and facilitate in the future the data sharing. So I think that's good. The topics that we have covered, a lot of monitoring. It's because it was the first need, maybe, but also and resistance management as well. But it's also because the funders decided to put priorities. And myself, I've been a bit frustrated that less projects or less topics were on preventive measures. But that's also the game with this kind of instrument, the ERANET. So it's up to funders to decide what they want to fund, and we have to cope with that. And my last point on before we elaborate a bit more on the outcomes of this workshop, is that integration is still a challenge. I said in this, you may remember the slides I presented, from one crop, 1 year, one pest, to the big pictures at not just the landscape, but also at the socio-technical systems level. So we still have to, it's still a challenge. It's not easy. We have seen some attempt to try to include more than one pest, to include more than one lever. So it's moving on, and we need to continue. And yes, it's part of the. I see some more integration is needed on the assessment criteria. So we cannot just focus on the efficiency of solutions towards pest or just efficiency plus economic. There is various criteria to consider, biodiversity at large and so on. About the combination of flavors, and it's not that easy, because we see that we cannot just split again, say, okay, let's work on the resistant varieties, on biocontrol, on agro-equipment, on whatever, and then to combine. Combination as such should be addressed. It was demonstrated, and again mentioned by Pierre about these bricks, that we need to address them also all together, because there might be synergy, but there might be antagonisms between levels. But of course, it's impossible to request that each project address the whole picture. Of course, it would not work. So we need to find new ways of putting together. So through networking, that's what we are doing, through data sharing, and still there is this with reports. There will be maybe open data, because now it's common. So you might publish your data on a repository, but still we would have to think of how we can bring together all this data with their diversity in order to create added value. We have this, meta-analysis might help, but we need to think about more. And also this, what Marion also mentioned, this multi-criteria assessment, I think it's something we still. Now, of course, C-IPM is a bit hopeless now for this because we are not a project anymore, but as was just mentioned through SUSCROP and maybe new initiatives like the one that was just presented, I think we can still be active, and I think it's not just me, but the executive committee is committed to continue and to support these new initiatives. And so what's next now? So videos and presentations will be posted. I don't know when, because everything is recorded, but we still have to put things in a kind of into the program. There will be executive summaries in the coming weeks. I'd like to mention that the projects are also supposed, well, they are monitored by funders. And we set up a mechanism. I'm looking at Astrid, and because she is responsible for the, well, to ensure that this monitoring of projects is duly done by, achieved by the funders. And so just a reminder, because I think that some projects should have been already assessed, evaluated for their midterm report, and I think there's still some missing reports. So a message to coordinators that you should not miss this point. And the, yeah, we have foreseen a workshop, as I said, in 2020, and again, it's likely to be organized together with SUSCROP, and maybe not in 2020, but anyway, that will be co-organized with SUSCROP for sure. And that's it now. I just want to thank you again for your attendance, your contributions. I hope that despite, well, this room was not that big, but well, at the end of the day, I think we did manage. And I just want to wish you a good journey back home or wherever. So see you next time.